Okay, so welcome to Tech Talk Thursday, Season 4, Episode 7. My guest today is Steve Vecchiarelli from calcuquote. He's joining me to discuss some of the current challenges with the electronic supply chain and how automated systems can help identify some of these roadblocks and assist manufacturers in component sourcing. So welcome, Steve. Nice to see you today.
Yeah, same here, Trevor. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, I believe you've got a very rich pedigree in the industry. Perhaps you can give us a quick background there to where you came from.
Sure. So I was in the electronic component industry a little more than 47 years. And the last 14 and a half years or so, I was the vice president of supply chain at DigiKey Corporation in Minnesota. I retired at the beginning of March 2020, and now I'm working with calcuquote, helping them move forward with their products and et cetera, et cetera. So it was a long time. I've seen a lot, and there's a lot more to come.
I bet. Well, March 2020, I can't think of better timing for you to retire. But, anyway, so there's a lot happened since then. We have some real challenges in the industry at the moment. We have a lot of shortages of components, devices, raw materials, labor, resulting in excessive prices of shipping, etc. Let's talk through some of the things that are happening there.
Sure.
Starting off with the shipping, of course, traditionally, a lot of the components coming from Asia were carried in the bellies of aircraft. There's not as many passenger aircraft going back and forward now because of COVID. So, that's put the prices up for shipping. And it's also made some go on to seaboard shipping, which has got its own challenges. Talk us through some of the things that are happening there.
Sure. So, both components were always part of the supply chain coming from Asia, whether it be to Europe or to the US. What seems to have happened now is that because there are fewer aircraft and the demands, there is no more competition with the airlines. It's now you're competing for space, not them competing on price for the freight. So now, you're competing for space to get into the bellies of the planes. Shipping on the ocean, and everybody used to, it was more or less 4 weeks or so from whenever it was shipped, and they built that into their lead time. Because of the lack of ships and especially, we're hearing the lack of containers to put the freight in, because it used to be that, you would put it on the water and it would take 4 weeks. And when it got to its destination, whether it be North America or Europe, they would be unloaded in a timely manner and the containers would then be empty and then they'd be reused. But what we're seeing now, because of labor shortages, COVID, whatever, they can't get the boats unloaded. So all those containers are sitting filled on ships at the harbor, but out on the water. And now they don't have enough containers to fill back at the source because they're all filled and they're not doing turnaround on the containers. So all of those, factors are making, ocean traffic longer. The thing even for it was 3 or 4 days in the canal, the Suez Canal, when it was blocked, slowed down more things. So all of that, now you're competing for space, and, suppliers are saying, I'll pay more to get my goods to products. So prices are rising just because they're willing to pay more. The energy, I think it's a worldwide inflation on energy where, fuel, whether it be gasoline or diesel, is up by a substantial amount. I know where I live, it's over 35% higher than it was a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that, figures into the price, which drives, adds to the cost of the material, which adds to the inflation, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, typically, looking back at your history when you were a VP at DigiKey, a lot of companies would rely on a company like DigiKey or Avnet or Arrow or one of these big guys to do the sourcing for them and be able to take ownership of that issue. But I mean, there's been so many problems resulting from these shortages that a lot of people are looking for more visibility. There's just not enough visibility for manufacturers. And that's driving a lot of them to systems for more automation and systems like the one that you're now working with calcuquote. Can you elaborate on how these automated systems like the one from calcuquote can help manufacturers to try and navigate these difficult times?
Sure. So, one of the fallacies about calcuquote and other systems like it is the suppliers at the beginning thought that this was going to be a race to the bottom to see who can, beat everybody else on price. Mm-hmm. From a calcuquote perspective, there was really none of that, but to increase their customers, the EMS world's productivity. So everybody has their own suppliers that and whether it be Arrow, Avnet, DigiKey, Mauser, it doesn't make any difference, that they do business with their key people for the value proposition that they bring to the party, whatever that is. So in times like this where the supply is pinched and demand is significantly higher than the supply, EMS companies have to go out and look for other sources. Everybody wants to stay within their own domain. So systems like calcuquote not only bring the company's key suppliers in there automated in this whole, beginning of what is this digital transformation. So they're all hooked up to their suppliers, so they have one source to get information, but they also can go out and survey other suppliers for materials that maybe their key suppliers don't have. Mm-hmm. So it gives them the ability to very quickly survey the field, get the material that they need to build whatever it is they're building so that they can service their customer better, and the circle just goes on and on.
Mm-hmm. You always hear stories about, people being, not wanting to necessarily go onto the grey market and go into these areas if possible. How wide does calcuquote go? Does it bring in all vendors of materials, and does it do any checking or?
So in calcuquote's case, we don't do anything with a supplier unless the customer requests it. So we've gone out and have agreements with a bunch of suppliers. We then, when we talk to our customers, say that, we have the ability to give you information from these people, but then the customer will facilitate it, but the customer has to, have the agreement or okay from the supplier to get that. We just don't open it up and give everybody everything. So there's a relationship that calcuquote, the information flows through, but there's a relationship between the supplier and the customer as to what they can do with the information and how they use it, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't give anybody anything that the supplier doesn't know about upfront.
Right. So once they make that agreement, though, and they facilitate it through you, the EMS company is guaranteed to have that amount of product delivered.
So they do a search, they build a bills of material. If they use one of our products that they place orders, the orders flow directly to the supplier, and then the supplier guarantees the material to them. If they use one of the gray market people, they need to know that, they do know that it's a gray market person, and that supplier has whatever things they have in place to prevent counterfeit or whatever. Counterfeit is a significant issue today that I think all end users face. Is this the real deal? Or is this just the plastic housing with leads coming out and nothing in the middle? So they need to know their sources, and like I said, they have to say, I want to deal with X company. I know the risks involved, but if I can't get it from one of my major suppliers, I have to build, and I'm willing to take the risks.
Right. Okay. And so, what else can calcuquote offer in terms of being able to look at what availability the manufacturer has and his pricing and that sort of thing?
So most of the suppliers that we're hooked up with give us an API, and for those that don't know an API, it's a application programming interface that puts us directly into their system. So via the API, we're able to look in a lot of cases real time at their inventory and their pricing. Mm-hmm. So at 11 o'clock on a Thursday morning, XYZ supplier had 10,000 of these widgets, and they want $1 each. Mm-hmm. Then they can make their buying decision to buy it or not. It's all, in a lot of cases, it's all real time. So if they go back tomorrow, that inventory may not be there because, they supply real time data. But it gives them an idea of what's in the marketplace. And depending on what systems that they use and what they use from calcuquote, they can place orders real time right there, or if they continue, they can place orders however they place orders. But they know that at that point in time, that was what that supplier had.
Right. So you've recently moved into working with PCB manufacturers. Tell us a little bit about how that relationship works, because there's already a number of companies offering PCB sourcing software. What does the version that calcuquote's offering? How does that differ?
Okay, so what calcuquote's doing at the current time is we're building a marketplace of capabilities, mm-hmm. so that as a customer is gathering information about the component side of the business and adding all their labor costs and everything in there, they were able to go out and, depending on the situation, go out and see a marketplace of different suppliers that they can pull information into their system. Now, right now, the connection with the PCB people is not where we're going to be down the road, but with some we have APIs that they can give instantaneous prices. Other, we facilitate them giving a quote. PCBs, are not as cut and dried as components. It's what material, how many layers, what are the traces, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it doesn't lend itself to be as instantaneous as the component pricing, but we're trying to get as close as we could to facilitate that. So again, the customer can respond to their customer as quickly as possible.
Right. Is it also a case where you're putting the original data, you're taking the data from the PCB quoting through into eventually into the bomb build and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. That's the long-term goal, to be able to pass through Gerbers and all that other stuff directly to the suppliers so that they can quickly respond and we can pass it back
Okay.
to the customer.
Okay. And do you have plans in the future for that to feed back to designers?
Absolutely. One of the things, and we see this is an ecosystem with many different arms in it. So we want to be able to reach back through to the designers so that they have an understanding of what they're doing, not only in the board part, but in the component part, so that they can build something that, based on however long they think their manufacturing life cycle is, that the components will be available. And so by the time it gets down to the EMS companies, they'll be able to pass a package that's almost ready to be done, and then go forward to be built, whether it be doing protos or going to full-blown production or whatever it is. So eventually all of this, there'll be transparency all the way from designer through to the supplier, through to whoever's going to build it, whether it be in-house or whether it be through an EMS provider, so that, and we've talked about this in the industry for years, full transparency from, cradle to grave, all the way through, which, for a mid-tier contract manufacturer, that's a huge, jump of, and a leap of faith from where they are today. A lot of the larger, the tier ones, already have built control towers that they do that. Where, certainly we play in the mid-tier, and in North America and in Europe, the majority of the customers are, mid-tier, high mix, lower volume.
Correct.
As compared to the Asian customers. This brings a whole different layer of visibility and removes complexity, because they know what they're getting into at every step of the way.
Yeah. Well, anything that helps to shorten the design for manufacturing loop and get that closed loop information back to the designer is definitely a good thing. So anyway, Steve, let's circle back on the issues that we started out with, which are, of course, is the excessive prices, the shipping problems, and the shortages. Where do you see this going? What's the end game?
I personally think that we're going to start to see some moderation in Q4 of this year. Other of my colleagues think that it may spill into Q1 or even Q2 of next year. I think that with all of the factors that are going on, I think we're going to start seeing it sooner than later. And now that doesn't mean that prices are going to go off a cliff or nosedive. I think we're going to see a moderation of the increases, or a flattening of the curve, so that we can get back to a more normal business environment of lead times, that we can have a better handle on planning than we've seen in the last, year and a half.
Is a lot of that not going to depend on COVID?
Well, if we look back at the beginning, right after I retired, if we look back at that time frame, we didn't know a lot about COVID. I mean, we just shut down the world. Now we have the vaccine, and a lot of us are vaccinated. If the government in the U.S. has its way, we'll all be vaccinated soon. But even that being said, I think that a shutdown like we had before won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we know a lot more now than we knew then. I mean, back then, we didn't know anything about what this was, and so with what was going on, we just shut everything down. I don't think that that's going to happen again. Could we slow down? Maybe, but I don't think so. I think that we've made enough progress that things will still keep going, and now it'll just be a normal business ebb and flow. It won't be as much tied to COVID as it was at the beginning.
Right. Okay. And then, of course, the other in the room is the geopolitical instability at the moment, and most notably Taiwan. What are your views on that? I mean, because it's home to TSMC, which is the most advanced in the industry, and it's also home to the six largest contract manufacturers in the world.
Yeah, no, that's a to be determined. If history kind of repeats itself, I mean, China went in and Hong Kong was supposed to be a wholly owned subsidiary for the next 25 years, but they decided to go in and annex it in to China. Is the mainland China going to go in and do that with Taiwan? They certainly, puffing up their chest about it. Even in the non-political world during the Olympics, to get their medal count up, they included the Taiwanese as part of China's medal count on their end. So will they take that over? And what will happen with that? Only time will tell. China has proven, I think, that they are a manufacturing giant. And would they want to slow down any of that? Probably not. So even if they did by force take over Taiwan, that doesn't necessarily mean that there would be a slowdown in the chip thing. I think it's too early to tell. China hasn't played its hand. The rest of the countries of the world haven't played their hand, but we're just going to have to keep an eye on it.
Yeah. Well, I certainly agree with you. I think it's watch this space really. But it's interesting to hear that you think there'll be some flattening towards the end of the year, which is going to help to alleviate some of the issues that are happening with the supply chain at the moment. But anyway, Steve, some great insight there, and it's been a pleasure talking to you today. And I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.